Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to a series of videos in which I am reading you a book. We are reading the Bible. We are reading the New Testament in the King James Version, specifically the Gospel according to St. Mark. And we are up to the final chapter. We are finishing St. Mark today. So this is chapter 16, and the story has come to a climax. This preacher and miracle worker that we have been following for 15 chapters, Jesus of Nazareth, has healed a lot of people, raised some people from the dead, raised the hackles of the powers that be in Jerusalem, been taken by them, tortured, and executed by them. And he dies on the cross, crying out to his Father in heaven, "Why have you forsaken me?" And now we get to the end, to chapter 16. And when the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James and Salome had brought sweet spices, that they might come and anoint him. And very early in the morning, the first day of the week, they came unto the sepulchre at the rising of the sun. And they said amongst themselves, Who shall roll us away the stone from the door of the sepulchre? And when they looked, they saw that the stone was rolled away, for it was very great. And entering into the sepulchre, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, clothed in a long white garment. And they were affrighted. And he saith unto them, Be not affrighted. Ye seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He is risen. He is not here. Behold the place where they laid him. But go your way, and tell his disciples and Peter that he goeth before you into Galilee. There ye shall see him, as he said unto you. And they went out quickly, and fled from the sepulchre, for they trembled and were amazed. Neither said they anything to any man, for they were afraid. And that is where the Gospel of Mark almost certainly stops in any reliable manuscript tradition. This book, the King James Bible, the editors of the Norton Critical Edition here, add on the most popular addition to the ending of the Gospel according to St. Mark. Since they have it here, we're going to read it. Now, when Jesus was risen early the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had cast 7 devils. And she went and told them that had been with him, and they mourned and wept. And they, when they had heard that he was alive, and had been seen of her, believed not. After that he appeared in another form unto 2 of them, as they walked, and went into the country. And they went and told it unto the residue, neither they believed them. Afterward he appeared unto 11 as they sat at meat, and upbraided them with their unbelief and hardness of heart, because they believed not which had seen him after he was risen. And he said unto them, Go ye into all the world, and preach the gospel to every creature. He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved, but he that believeth shall not be damned. And these signs shall follow them that believe. In my name shall they cast out devils. They shall speak with new tongues. They shall take up serpents, and if they drink any deadly thing, it shall not hurt them. They shall lay hands on the sick, and they shall recover. So then, after the Lord had spoken unto them, he was received up into heaven, and sat on the right hand of God. And they went forth and preached everywhere, the Lord working with them, and confirming the word with signs following. Amen. That is a false ending to Mark. That is certainly not something that the original author, whoever it was, of this gospel added on. This gospel ends with the women at the tomb being told by a boy in glowing white that Jesus has risen, and them being so terrified that they run away and tell no one. They don't start spreading the word, they don't tell the disciples what they've seen, and they don't see Jesus. It's only after that, it's a long-standing manuscript tradition that adds another ending on top of that. So we can look at the end of Mark in a couple of different ways because of that. Because there's a long-standing church tradition on one hand and a pretty ironclad manuscript tradition on the other, we can look at this in 2 different ways. Either, if we go by the original ending, Jesus was an itinerant preacher and miracle worker who was taken by the Jews and with the cognizance of the Romans executed in misery and squalor and in personal despair. He hangs on the cross and asks why the God that he has served so well on earth has abandoned him. His ministry is a failure. And that's it. He dies, it's taken down and put in a tomb by a moneyed well-wisher. And that's it. That's the end of the story. We don't know who this youth in the white garment is. I guess you could assume that the youth is supernatural. Plenty of people can wear white, and it's possible that it's renders curious the whole details of this last chapter, because if the women ran away and told no one, how is Mark writing this? How does he know anything that they saw if they told no one? On the one hand, there's that, and that is a fitting capstone to the gospel that Mark has written, that we have read all through all these chapters, of a very human Jesus, a tetchy, querulous, argumentative, thin-skinned human figure. It's easy to read that gospel and think, well, whatever supernatural powers this figure had to heal people, in the end, he got too big for his britches, became too openly confrontational with the official powers of his day, and was killed by them, and that's it. And he dies wondering why his mission didn't work. He dies wondering why his God has abandoned him. That is one way to read this, based on what is probably the actual ending of Mark. I'm saying the actual in terms of the manuscript tradition. Whoever wrote this gospel probably didn't end it this way at that point. We don't know, but probably not. You can picture that there might have been an ending from AD 100 or thereabouts that was lost. It's possible. Later and less trustworthy manuscript traditions have added on this final part, these final few verses. And what do they say? What's the picture that they say also lines up with a theme running through Mark, which is people not really knowing what to make of Jesus. Not really. The disciples don't ever, no matter how many wonders they see, they don't ever seem to get what's going on. They don't ever seem to believe him. Fundamentally believe him. Maybe Peter, and maybe that's why he's separated from the others here. Go tell the disciples and Peter. But mostly not. So it would make sense in one level, looking at one aspect, one thread running through Mark, it would make sense that the theme of this tacked on ending would be that they don't believe that he rose from the dead. And that they need multiple convincings. They need multiple convincings of that. Mary Magdalene sees Jesus, and she tells them, and they don't believe her. Two of them see him in what is frequently called another form, that we're not sure that they recognize him, but they don't believe that he rose from the dead, whether he shows himself to them and they say that, or whether in disguise they tell him that. And then the third time, when he shows up while they're eating. Why would the disciples even stay together? But he shows up while they're eating and upbraids them. Now that is also, whoever wrote this ending, and who knows where this ending comes from, but whoever wrote this ending was obviously familiar with the tone of the rest of Mark's gospel. Because that's exactly what the Jesus in Mark would do. He would rag on them. He would criticize them. He's not a particularly nice character in this gospel. And so depending on where you stand, what your faith tradition is, for instance, or what you want to believe about this gospel, well, you have two different choices. But the gospel itself ends with the women fleeing from the tomb and vowing to tell no one what they saw because they're too afraid. I would say that it's up to you. It's up to your interpretive desire. Which ending do you like better? It's not often that ancient texts will give us multiple endings that you can pick from, especially that are thematically consistent with the rest of the book. The only thing that I would add about this tacked-on ending is the harm that it has done. I could talk specifically. I have been in very small towns in the American South and in the Appalachian country, where there were very small churches that kept rattlesnakes in the basement. They were horrifying places. I got to know one of them fairly well, and they dance. They take those snakes out of their containers and dance with them on stage, specifically because of this line in this false ending to Mark, that you shall handle serpents. The implication being you shall handle serpents and they won't hurt you. They do. If you get, those rattlesnakes are usually very sick or drugged or drained of their venom. But if one of them isn't, and I was never familiar with one of those snake handling churches that took this so seriously that it was an offense in the church if you did milk the snakes. Some of them are that way. Some of them are so strict about this verse that you can be excommunicated, or worse, you can be given to the snakes if you milk them ahead of time. The snakes have to be full of venom. That's the whole point of your faith. In those churches, people routinely die. They routinely get bitten and die. They won't take medical help because what would that be? What would that say about their faith? They just lay down and die. They have a heart attack or whatever. That's a harm. A real word, harm, that has come. That has been, I think that tradition is on the outs here in America, and I don't think it exists anywhere else in the world. I think it's on the outs. I think it's dying in America. Certainly the two places that I became familiar with, and one in particular that I became familiar with, they don't have any new converts. It's impossible for a snake-handling cult, sect of Christianity, to survive cell phones. There's just no way. There's no way that can happen. But in pre-highways, pre-phone, pre-radio, they were popular. Who knows how many people have suffered not only the death or amputation from being bitten by a rattlesnake, when there's only an insane person would handle a snake like that, but also from the horror of it. These places it's horrifying, having these things kept in the basement, in the dark, in these old wooden containers that have gone down from generation to generation. There's that. So I could mention that as a problem with this false ending to Mark. I could also mention something that has cropped up on Mark before. Here being done by the writer rather than from the mouth of Jesus himself, but it's a supernatural promise that is absolutely false. And what are you supposed to? If you're reading it as we are doing it now, just as a text, trying to read it just as a book, well, then you're going to look at the good things, and you're going to look at the bad things, and you're going to look at the weird things, and you're going to look at the things that are patently false. Things that just, they're spoken about things in the real world, they're spoken in the real world, and the real world says they're not true. If you're looking at them through a faith lens, then you're immediately going to have to shift to interpretation, to metaphor, to allegory. You're immediately going to have to do that when supernatural claims are made that are false, that are just flatly false. When Jesus says the end of the world will happen in the lifetime of people who are listening to me right now, well, that's a supernatural claim. That's prophesying the future, and that is flatly false. That was made 2,000 years ago. The world hasn't ended. And the same thing is true here. I'm sure you noticed it. And these signs shall follow them that believe. In my name shall they cast out devils. There are no such things as devils. There are no such things as devils. They don't exist. You want to say they do exist, well, then they've done a very good job of hiding from all the means we have to know now that they do or do not exist. But it goes on from there. They shall speak with new tongues. They shall take up serpents, and if they drink any deadly thing, it will not hurt them. And they shall lay hands on the sick, and they shall recover. As many, many people have pointed out in the last 400 years at least, if this were true, then there would be fervently believing Christians in every hospital in the world. They would be in high demand. They would be paid millions of dollars. I'm a Hindu. I don't have your faith. You're a Christian. And if this claim is true, if this were actually true in the real world, well, then you can heal people. If your faith is pure, you can heal people by laying hands on them and making them well. And also, you can't be hurt by poison. Pretty sure that everyone at Jonestown was a fervent Christian. They all died. But we know that this isn't true. This is just factually false, unless you are going to say that there has never been a Christian with true faith. Which would, as I've said a couple of times in earlier chapters in this gospel, that would be a pretty dismal batting average for any religion to say that it's never had a genuine believer. I think that's impossible, right? That claim is impossible. If you are a Christian or from a Christian household, probably your faith is true, and almost certainly you have known people in your family whose faith are true, who's known people in your community whose faith is true. Meaning, it's not humbug, they're not lying, they're not being hypocritical, they honestly do believe, and it fills them with light, it fills them with wonder, it makes them stronger, better, more caring, more broad-minded. I know lots of Christians who fit that definition. I know plenty, and have known in my life, plenty of Christians for whom there is no alternative but to say that their faith is true. There's no way that you can say to them, well, there's a better Christian belief than yours out there somewhere. They would never say it, but there's no way you can say that about them. And none of those people can ingest Clorox and live. Just take up a jug of Clorox and just chug the whole thing like you would Pepsi. If they did that, they would die. If they injected strychnine, they would die. And when their loved ones, and I'm not talking old people who are at the end of their life, so it feels natural. I'm talking about young people, their children, are dying in agony in the hospital. They certainly cannot heal those children. Never have been able to. Not once. Not any Christian. That's never happened anywhere, ever. Even the prayers don't work, but certainly they can't do it themselves by laying on their hands. So the claims here, the supernatural claims here in this enlarged, added on ending to Mark, cause us problems. They cause some of the problems that have cropped up in this gospel. Now, we are ending with the gospel according to St. Mark here, and I am going to move on. We're going to move on to Matthew. Gospel according to St. Matthew will be the next one that we do. And it'll be fascinating. I really do believe it will be fascinating. Whether you are a Christian or a Muslim or an atheist, it'll be fascinating because we'll be reading these things relatively back to back. We'll be able to see Matthew draws an enormous amount of material from Mark. An enormous amount. But he changes a lot too. So we'll be able to see that. I think that will be fascinating. It'll be so much fun to talk about all that stuff. And just see what's actually here. The King James Bible was all over the world, is still all over the world. There are plenty of Christian denominations that'll cast you out. They'll say, you're paying your dues, but you're out. We don't want you here if you read any translation of the Bible other than the King James. There are plenty of denominations that do that. Maybe you grew up in one of them. It's had a huge amount of influence. A huge amount of people have lived under the shadow of this work. How many of them have actually read what's there? Much less spiritedly, no pun intended, talked about it. So we're going to do that, but I wonder if we shouldn't take a small break in between Gospels. Maybe there's something I can read you that's much shorter that we can do in just one sitting or two sittings. I'm going to mull on that. I don't think I'm going to go straight to the Gospel according to St. Matthew next. We'll see. I'll mull on it. I'm thinking we might want to read something short. something I don't know, to lighten the mood, to cleanse the palate in between Gospels. I'll have to see. I'll have to see what, and of course suggestions are welcome, but I'll have to see. It has to be something that's in the common domain. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the original language. It can be in translation, obviously, since we're reading the King James. It's just that the translation also has to be in the common domain. So either the work or the translation has to be 100 years old, something like that. So there's plenty to choose from. I don't know, but that is the Gospel according to St. Mark. That was a lot of fun. I admit, when I started this, my heart was in my throat just a bit, because the last thing I want is for any of you watching this to feel antagonized. I'll antagonize you plenty about the books you read or the writing you're not doing, but not about your faith. No, that's a cheap thing to do. You know exactly where I stand on the subject, and if you're a believing Christian, well, I know exactly where you stand on the subject. There's no reason to attack that. In fact, knowing that and still being friends is hugely fruitful to sit and talk about it, which is lots of fun. It's only been the weakest Christians that I've known in my life who thought that talk about their faith endangered it. Talking about their faith and also reading the Gospels like this and picking apart what's good, what's bad, what's inconsistent, what's flatly wrong, that also should not threaten the faith. But I know that it does, and for some people, and I worried when I started this that you would take it wrong. I worried that the comment section on my emails would be full of people saying, this is awful petty of you. I thought that you sneered at the so-called new atheists. I most certainly do. I worried that people would write and say, I thought you sneered at them. I thought that although you don't share any kind of religious faith, you appreciate the things that it can do, the good things that it can do. But now you're doing this. And I've been very pleasantly surprised that you are not reacting that way, and that's great, because I really did want to do all four Gospels. Not only because reading the synoptics altogether is lots of fun, but also because it has been probably 20 years, maybe a little more than that, since I dragged any kind of reading group through the Gospel according to St. John, and I really want to do that. We'll finish with that. So I'm glad of that. Thank you very much for that. You've once again restored my faith in my imaginary booktube friends. I have the best imaginary booktube friends. But I still think we could use a break. What should we read? What should we read? I still want to read to you and talk about what I read. This is too much fun. But what should it be? Something short. Any ideas would be appreciated. But I'm gonna wrap this up for now. Whatever it is, maybe we'll take a break tomorrow. Whatever it is, though, we will continue. So I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.